relax. This is TOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson. Hello, and thank you for watching.
And thank you to everyone who reached out to me in the last couple of weeks asking if I was okay.
Were relaxed.
If I was relaxed. I was very much not relaxed. Cyclone Alfred has been and gone.
Ex-Tropical Cyclone
Yes, downgraded.
Alfred. It's tough if you're a tropical cyclone and you get downgraded to a former tropical cyclone, right? It feels like one of those things where I know it's only a technical, meteorological.
Give it a shot.
A meteorological. Yeah, meteorological.
Meteorological.
No,
it's the middle
I'm adding
part.
Something in there.
Is it because it's not meteor?
Meteor.
It's not about meteors. It's
meteorological.
Meteorological.
Is this good podcasting? Bomb. The bomb said.
The weatherman.
The weatherman said.
Or woman.
Weather person. The weather people.
Yep.
Is this good podcasting?
I don't know.
So the weather people said that it was a tropical cyclone. It was originally going to be called
meteorological.
Meteorological. Meteorological.
A meteor.
Meteorological.
Meteorological.
Meteorological. So it's a meteor. Real logical.
Yeah, the rapper.
The rapper.
Yeah.
So if he's beat up,
if I put on weight,
it's a meteor real logical. Yeah, okay, now I'll remember.
I got it. Never forget. I'll never forget now. Meteorological.
That actually feels like a Slim Shady Eminem style lyric, right?
Yeah.
Is it meteorological or meteorological?
Is he going to make it rain? He's going to make it rain. He's a meteorological.
Yeah. Okay, so it was going to be called Anthony. They renamed it to Alfred because the Prime Minister of Australia is called Anthony Albanese. Did you know that's the reason they renamed it?
No, I don't even know how they come up with names in the first place.
So it's alphabetical. It swaps from male to female. I think every cyclone, I believe, is how it works. And then
it didn't used to be the case, though, did it? It used to be just female. Is that correct?
I believe so. And but now it's male to female, and it just letter to letter, alphabetical order. Okay. And so apparently they have a list of names, and then, it just goes through in a cycle.
Well, Cyclone Charlie won't be far away at the rate we're going.
Well, it does depend on if there has there been a previous Cyclone Charlie? Maybe that's something Mike can
Cyclone Charles? Would it be Cyclone Charles or Cyclone Charlie?
What would you be
more scared of?
Yeah, like Cyclone Charles is coming. Oh no, Cyclone Charlie.
Fun.
Yeah, Cyclone Charlie's here. Hey, who's that bloke? Yeah. Oh, it's Cyclone Charlie. Yeah.
Oh. It's like, who's that bloke at the party? Oh, that's Cyclone Charlie. Just you wait.
Mate, you've got to invite Cyclone Charlie to get this shit kicked off in the first place, right? So, so it goes in alphabetical order. Boy, girl, I believe is the way that it works. But if there was someone who was prominently in the news and in the news cycle, they reserve the right to substitute out their name and put in the name of someone else. And I think going into an Australian election campaign off the back of what will have some elements of climate change involved with it, probably it being, Cyclone Anthony, it would have been a gift to headline writers around the country, but otherwise I can see why they decided to change it.
Well, it would make sense too, because for many of us, it was predicted dire consequences, and it turned out to be remarkably ineffective.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was one of those things.
I should say, too,
Ex-Tropical Cyclone Alfred, it has wrought enormous damage.
It has wrought enormous damage. Yes. What was predicted for the northern New South Wales, though, in the lead up to it, it was a weird feeling too, because I've never lived through a cyclone. Severe weather events, obviously the floods of 2022.
Yeah. Almost, and almost to the day. That was the memory of those, because I popped up in my sort of reminders online of a flood fundraiser that I had done, for the Lismore floods, and I was like, oh my God, this is literally, it must be so terrible for people, particularly in that area of the world, who are not only having flashbacks to the worst thing that they've ever been through, but the fact that it had happened almost on this exact same date 3 years before.
But we got no warning with 2022. It just sort of happened. True. Whereas there was, and I guess ignorant to a lot of stuff. So I didn't really hear about it until, I know it formed quite quickly, but Monday evening, I think my sister from Melbourne sent me a text saying, I hope you guys will be okay. And I was like, why? What's going on? And then I thought I should
just in general. Yeah. Just a general text.
I thought I should consult with a meteorological. So I put on my favorite album. And so when I saw it, I was like, okay. And I have anxiety anyway. And so the anxiety around because the predictions at the start were, could be category 2 into 3, 160-kilometre winds. Where we live in the Northern Rivers, we're not prone to flooding. Like, we do flood. There is a creek in town and stuff, but it's not like the low-lying areas of Lismore or even parts of Byron. But we live in an old house on a hill surrounded by trees. And so when you hear there's going to be 160-kilometre winds, it's like, well, a house could blow down.
Yeah.
Like, it could be like the Three Little Pigs story.
Well, as somebody who, when I was living in that part of the world, had like storms do damage to my roof that ended up
That's
like
right.
insurance
Your roof flew off, right?
Yeah, like $250,000 worth of damage to the roof, most of which was luckily covered by insurance, but like still took 6 months or 7 months or something to get it all, fixed, or maybe even longer than that, actually, the whole process. So you just don't want to have to go through any of it. Even if you are safe, it can be a problem you have to deal with for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. There was a lot of articles, and this was maybe one of the positive things about it, was it shone a bit of a light on the fact that there are people in that Lismore area who are still without their homes 100%. From last time, are still, living without houses or sharing houses with people, or haven't been able to recover economically or get insurance, even if they've been managing to move back into a house.
Yeah, I think that the PTSD is real, even for people who weren't in areas that were directly affected, like Lismore, because of the cleanup.
Yeah.
Because those efforts went on for weeks, if not months. Where
I felt it. Like, I was there for that part of it. I was not there for any of this part of it, but I was in Adelaide. And that I was like literally reading it all, and I said to somebody, I said, I think I'm feeling PTSD from being in this circumstance. I can't imagine what it would be for people who are actually on the front lines of it.
Yeah. And so it was interesting that panic buying, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That, oh shit.
So that did happen again.
100%.
All of it.
And I thought I was actually in quite early. So I found out Monday night. So first thing Tuesday morning, I went to get just some like grocery supplies. Woolies, the Woolies in Byron is massive, but it was pretty much pick clean.
Right.
Any kind of like fresh food. There's no fruit, no veg, no toilet paper. I can't fucking believe we're doing that again. Like, did we learn nothing?
Well, what we learned is that everyone takes the toilet paper, so that we have to get in first for the toilet paper.
Very little pasta, very little rice. Tinned food was obviously, a lot of that was gone as well. So I managed to I did just a bit of a run around, and in my head, I was like, okay, so they were saying 2 or 3 days you might be affected if, from when the cyclone crosses the border. So I thought, okay, 2 or 3 days worth of food. So I did a mix of canned food, and I did buy some kind of refrigerated goods, and like, this might be a dumb idea if we lose power. And then I was like, okay, so what about like power supplies and stuff? So in my head, I was like, well, if we just get one of those little battery chargers, that you can get at least we have the phones on, Wi-Fi, all that kind of stuff. But they were all gone. Like Bunnings, again, like I went into Bunnings, and I just offhandedly said to one of the employees there, oh, you must be getting slammed right now. And he's like, no, because everyone came yesterday. It was quiet now. There's nothing left. And I was like, you don't have any charges? Nothing? And he was like, no. I was like, oh, fuck. So I started panic buying, because I'm like, well, everyone else is taking everything.
Buy some pool cleaner.
Yeah, I did.
Some chlorine.
I went,
a net.
The only thing I could...
A 2x4.
I bought like some cable ties and a bucket. I don't know why. I thought it was going to be like scooping white water out of my living room or something. I saw a jerry can, like a 20-litre jerry can that you'd put in the back of your four-wheel drive. And it's like, well, I'll get one of those just in case, because I remember fuel, we got cut off from getting any fuel for about a week last time. So I bought the jerry can. And then as the biggest stroke of luck, I went out to dinner in town with Gemma and a couple of friends, and Pete Timms, who people might know from the first series of Big Brother. He happened to be there. And he just sat down next to me, and Pete is working in a hardware now. And he said to me, hey, mate, you looking to get your hands on a generator? And I was like, why? And it's like, well, we've been cleaned out. I think he told me they had sold something like 400 generators in the space of 2 days, which is insane. That's like almost like $250,000. Okay. And so I was like, and it's like, there's a truck coming from Sydney tomorrow. I can put one aside for you. And so then I just started texting everyone that I knew in town saying, hey, there's a delivery coming. And so Pete's phone was blowing up. I'm sure it's great. Like, I'm sure he's getting a little cut on every one of these sales. But I went and got that generator. And
Well, also very different lives that we're living these days when you're texting your friends to say there's a delivery arriving, do you want in on it? And it's a generator from Sydney.
yeah, I called Pete back and said, hey, if 4 of us go in, do we get a discount?
That's right. I've got a mate who'd also like a generator. Do you reckon you can get...
Yeah, the police arrest me and go, we know what this code word is.
Generators. No,
literally generator. Want to go all night. So managed to get the Genny and have never used a generator before. So I was like, okay, this I better work out how this goes.
Before the emergency arrives, you should work out how the generator works.
So that's the other thing. So then there's a ticking clock. And it was don't look up because we had the ABC going constantly and you're checking your phone and, you signed up to hazards near me and stuff. And it's all just like...
You don't want to be listening to the ABC though, mate. That's just bloody full of climate change propaganda.
That's right. Bloody Chardonnay sipping limousine liberals.
Yeah. What do they know?
So they were... And everyone, the countdown was like, this is going to be bad. This is bad. Like,
Which is good, by the way. They needed to warn people that the potential of it was like the worst case scenario because you've got to prepare for the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And again, to even like before we get to your personal thing, in general, I think when they've downgraded it from like tropical cyclone to ex-tropical cyclone, like I said, I know that it's a meteorological term.
But I know what the title of this episode is going to be, mate. He's already written it down.
I'm literally typing it right now.
Meteorological. So, but I know that's just a term, but it makes it sound to people who didn't pay close attention that there wasn't severe damages that came from this. Like, I mean, the beaches, like right up that like Gold Coast and up further, the beaches have disappeared. People have had severe flood damage. There has been severe consequences regardless, but they needed to warn for the most severe of consequences.
That's right. And the thing is, like, so you are looking for, you've got the, the government apps and Hazards Near Me and the SES New South Wales and all this kind of stuff, which are giving you the good info.
Yeah.
But then
local Facebook groups. Have you gone to
you can't help but get some local opinions. Like some people who lived in the area for 20 years.
In the pandemic, it was the pandemic and floods because the best of people and the worst of people all combined together into one Facebook group.
And there's no nuance in those opinions because you had some people saying this is going to be the apocalypse. Yeah. Get out now. Get out while you can.
And some saying it's not as bad as the chemtrails.
And some old bloke saying, we used to have cyclones every summer when I was a kid and it was fun. It was good surf. Yeah. Like, that was honestly the two, the dichotomy. You'd sort of see those two posts. There's a really good a climate resilience page. And they were saying, okay, look, here's the sort of practical things you need to think about, like storing water, for instance, like fill your sinks because running water might get cut off for a while. This is the kind of foods that'll store longer. This is the thing that I was most concerned about was because the cyclone was blowing in from the east. It was going to be an easterly.
Yes.
And our upstairs living room, the most vulnerable part of the house, faces due east with big bay windows, which is a Queenslander feature.
But not ideal for high winds.
Or not high, but also not ideal that our house is 115 years old and that window frame has not been replaced in 115 years. No. So like it is so brittle. And so I was just having visions of just like, the wind's blowing in.
Yeah, the wind blows it in or a wind blows a tree onto it and it smashes.
Or or the beautiful nature reserve that we face out onto just like becomes like missiles from everywhere.
That's right. Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So a lot of the SES said you tape up your windows, you do that big X and you tape across there. And they said, look, it's not really, if it's going to break, they're going to break. You're trying to minimize small shards, and so if you tape it up, if it does break, at least it's easy to remove the pieces and stuff. So I taped up all the windows, then put a big tarp on it.
Can I just tell you, by the way, the dumbest thing that I just thought? This is how stupid I am and how non-practical I am. I was literally like, but how are you going to get on the outside of the window? Like in my head, it hadn't occurred that you could just tape the windows from the inside.
Yeah.
I would have been out there on a ladder in the wind trying to
But the added complication to all of this is we've got a 5-year-old in the house. And so you are wanting to prepare without alarming her. And so
you need to be alert, but not alarmed.
And there was advice as well from like psychologists about how to, talk to children. Like you don't want to
What is the advice about it?
Well, to be honest, but not not panic them, the way you'd talk to anyone, which is like we're expecting heavy winds and storms. We're just trying to make sure the house is safe.
For that?
Yeah, we're not sure. It's not necessarily that bad things are going to happen, but we just want to make sure that the house is safe.
Although, pay attention because this is what the entirety of your future is going to be like.
Exactly.
Is this too much? Am I panicking?
These unprecedented weather events, which are becoming very precedented.
Yeah, the good news is that actually you're living currently through the best weather you'll ever get to experience in your entire life.
It did make me think, though, like when I was a kid, so she's 5 years old, to the age of 5, I tried to think of what severe weather events I had lived through. I think Ash Wednesday happened when I was before I was 5. And then the only other thing I can remember is that massive dust storm that hit Melbourne in like 82, I think it was, where it was like a blew in from Adelaide, fucking bloody Adelaide, or something like that. Do you remember the dust storm?
I don't know if the dust storm made it down our way.
Oh, geez, look at that. Good surf.
Well, that's what I loved about Ex-Tropical Cyclone Alfred. Cyclone. Can't say that now. I've got meteorological, but I can't say cyclone. So was that part of the reason that it got downgraded was that the air went out of it after it hit a bunch of islands on the way through. So it might have been that idea with the dust storm as well. You know, you get the majority of it in Melbourne.
Melbourne buffered it.
And it buffers it and it doesn't make it down. It was floods and droughts on the farm. Obviously, you're very, very weather aware growing up on a farm. Every day, Dad would be able to tell you how much it had rained, how much it had rained that year, you know, whatever, because it's such a huge part of the business. As my brother always says, being a farmer is really just growing grass and the rest of it is just that's all the business is really about, your capacity to grow grass. And so we constantly were aware of it's a flood or it's a drought, those sort of things.
Yeah.
But they were just kind of part of the infrastructure of being a farmer or being on the land. So
it's a sunburnt country, Will.
Yeah. There was
Land
bushfires, like you said, like Ash Wednesday and whatever, but I never felt, it wasn't until the Lismore floods that I think, even the bushfires previous to that in the summer, like when the skies were black and they were so horrible, I didn't feel like I was on the front line of any of that, even though it affected a lot of areas that, you know, I was very familiar with. I wasn't on the front line of it, but it was just the Lismore floods, I think. That was the front lines.
Yeah. So in Iona's first 5 years of life, her first year of life was the bushfires. Yep. Second, third year was the floods, and then there's this cyclone. So I'm like, that's 3 pretty significant weather events.
Yeah, plus in the middle of it, a global pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
Like the first 5 years of her life have been a bushfire, a flood, a pandemic, and a cyclone. She must
just think the world
it's like a horrible, unstable, horrible place. And by the way, I repeat it again, these are the best conditions she will ever live in her entire life.
But I did ask her, since she's gone back to school, I'm like, did they talk about it? Did the kids have stories about it? I was just sort of keen to know. And she was like, no. And so I think most parents just sort of, they didn't bring it up with the kids that much at all. And her experience of the whole thing was like, she loved it. Like she got to stay home. She stayed in her pajamas for 2 days, watched tapes of iPad. Like as far as she's concerned, it was pretty cool. So my big concern, so in the country you're on, you know, we don't have, the gas is gas bottles. So you've got like, you know, 2 huge gas cylinders. So they talk about when the cyclone hits, you want to disconnect gas, electricity, potentially water, just depending on what happens. So I went around the house, I secured everything. We got, you know, had to take down trampoline, had to clear the lawn and just tied everything down. I bought so many cable ties, like everything. You'd think I was into S&M, like the amount of bondage I put my house into, like the wheelie bins, bolted them down. Everything was just like tied down. And then that first night, so the 2 days before across the border, we got really, really heavy rains. And because we've got like the tin roof and the main bedrooms are upstairs, it was so loud. And Gemma and Iona managed to sleep okay, but I was just like, it really started to like freak me out. And so I got up in the middle of the night, like, I don't know, 2 a.m. with my torch and started like in the heavy rain with my jacket, circling the house, looking for potential points of weakness, like just sort of keeping an eye out to see, okay, when the wind's coming in, what's being affected, or maybe I should get a tarp up there. And as if I could do anything, if like it really kicked into 100, 200 kilometer winds, like that anything I do would do anything. But I had a really sleepless night. And then the next morning, like, it's funny, you have this impression of your dad when you're a kid. I'm sure your dad was like this. My dad definitely was like this, that your dad's always just doing stuff. Like, where's Dad? He's in the shed. He's just doing stuff. And you never quite know. He's just tinkering around. He's either in the shed or he's outside the house or he's in the garden or whatever, just tinkering. And that was me. And what I have come to realize is when you're a middle-aged man and you are powerless, you know, you are so insignificant in the face of Mother Nature and life itself that you feel compelled to just tinker with things in the faint hope that you can affect change, that you can stop
pissing into
inevitable.
The wind, right?
Exactly. Because it was, and look, I think I did a pretty good job. Like I managed to kind of get everything covered and tied down. But then that night, because they kept pushing the crossing date back. And so it was like 12 hours till it was meant to cross. Yep. And I remember sort of sitting there and I was glued to kind of the bomb and listening to the radio and all the doom predictions. And I was like, okay, fuck, like, all right, so what's the worst thing that could happen? It actually reminded me a little bit of when I used to be a producer when Jeremy and I had the production company. And the night before a shoot, I'd always have a sleepless night because I'd be sitting there running simulations about, well, if this goes wrong, what will I do? You know, if this, the camera breaks down and we have to get a set, where am I going to get that from? You know, and you sort of, you game 1,000 different hypotheticals.
Well, in a way, that's like a somewhat, if you don't let it get out of control, that is a somewhat valuable part of how your brain works that you can apply to a job like that, because the role of a producer is to have problem solved. And if you thought through what the problems might be in advance, then when they arrive, you might be able to deal with them better. But unfortunately, that style of thinking can also, if you are just using it all the time, it can become overwhelming if you're trying to game every possible scenario where something might go wrong.
Well, when I used to produce those music videos and those ads and stuff, not once ever did the thing that I had hypothesized come to bear. Like it was always the amount of energy I put into worrying and stressing and stuff. Things did go wrong.
Yes. But not the things that you would worry or stressed about.
And it's funny, when I talked to my therapist about this, she was like, well, you could sit there and come up with a million scenarios and a million responses, but the fact is they're never going to play out exactly as you've imagined them, and you're going to have to, you know, recalibrate and find the resourcefulness anew anyway. So why don't you just not worry about it and just trust in the fact that, you know, you're capable of dealing with what comes up?
Well, I think it's also that thing of there's a difference between creating things to worry about, where you're like, here are all, let's just say there were 10 things that could go wrong with the scenario, and then you worry about each of those things, as opposed to going, here are the 10 potential things that could go wrong with this scenario. If this happened, how would I deal with this? If this happened, how would I deal with this? But not in a way that you take on the worry of the thing actually happening.
Yes.
Like, I think that's the difference. Like, if I find myself going, oh, I'm going to be...
well, what happens is because you worry about the thing going wrong, but then you also worry about the aftermath, which is like, but that precludes you stopping it or doing anything about it. You know what I mean? Like, you are actually, it's not helpful because you are imagining the worst case scenario, which includes you being incapable of stopping or affecting that outcome in any way. So what is the point of gaming that if you're just, it's like mental doom scrolling?
It's funny, when I'm doing my improvised show, which I've been doing a lot of obviously recently, and I've never done this many of them in a row before, so I'm learning new things about myself and how to do them best. And it's really similar to what you're saying, which is this idea of, I've realized the best thing that I can do, I know that things will go wrong in the show or not go how I wanted them to go, or there'll be random elements that I need to deal with. So I could think through the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 different scenarios where something could go wrong in the show and try to game out what I would do in each of those situations if one of those things were to happen. But then, as you said, it would never be exactly how the person would never say exactly what I thought they were going to say or whatever. So you'd be trying to jam a preconceived solution into a problem that doesn't perfectly fit the problem. Or you can go, tonight, most likely, at some stage, I will need to deal with the scenario that I haven't predicted. What is the best way for me to be in a headspace so that I am best prepared to deal with that scenario when it occurs?
And what is the answer?
Well, so for me, that's about how then I prepare my day, how much sleep I get, how my voice feels, what I've been doing before the show, like have I eaten, like just control.
Shut up, dickhead. Shut up, wanker. Oh, yeah, you are. Just you practicing the mirror. Oh, come on, guys. I'm just trying to make people laugh.
I don't come down to your place and slap the dicks out of your mouth. Got him. Got me.
You're like De Niro in Taxi Driver. Oh, yeah? You're talking to me?
talking to me?
No, mate. We paid to see you talk to us.
You're talking to me? Yeah. If you ask me who I am, what's my name and what my job is.
You asked if we're dating.
You're talking to me? Yeah. You initiated it. You said, are you? So it is that thing of preparing yourself to be ready to make the analogy that comes up a lot for me is I had Steve Waugh on the radio show and I asked him about batting against the West Indies. And I said, how do you, like when they're bowling at, 95 miles an hour, how do you have time to make the decision of whether you're going to play a cut shot or a pull shot or a drive? And he said, you don't. He said, you've got to spend your entire career practicing to be able to do that. And then in that scenario, you need to be able to go out there and not think, like let your instincts and the practice and the work you've done, like be in the best position, prepare yourself the best to be able to play. And he said, when you're in bad form, it's mostly because you're thinking too much or you're in your own head or you're trying to decide what shot to make rather than just playing. And so it's that idea of in these scenarios, you could game plan 1,000 scenarios of what could go wrong. But the best thing is going, okay, tonight I might need to deal with an emergency. The best way to deal with an emergency is for me to be rested, healthy, clear thinking, not stressed, not affected by alcohol, not just any of those sort of things that might,
which is none of the things that I did. In fact, I did the opposite. I was like, I need something to take the edge off. I'm feeling very stressed. I just need to dull my reflexes and my response time.
Right. So
it was funny actually at one point because I was texting with Sammy Cav and the area he lives in was unaffected because we lost power on that first night. So the 24 hours before it hit, we lost power. I mean, where I live, someone in town sneezes too hard and we have a blackout. We lose blackout. We black out all the time. So was quite prepared for that. So I got the genny going and I read all the instructions and I was like, oh, of course.
Now, are we fine with genny as the slang term for generator, by the way?
Yeah, why would we ever?
I don't know. I don't like it when you say it.
Genny.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't have a particular. I mean, I wasn't associating.
No, there's nothing wrong with saying genny. What's your? Is it because I'm saying it? If I was a more convincing,
say it again,
genny.
Say it in context, like.
I read the instructions, got the genny fired up.
No, I don't like it.
Genny, like a J or a G?
It's a G.
Really?
What?
I mean, generator spelled with a G, do they?
Yes.
Really?
Jennies, yes.
Jenny, the Jenny.
Yeah.
Do you want
it's what Pete said to me. Do you want to get a Jenny? And I said, yeah, I'll have a Jenny.
It's growing on me.
I don't know if I trust Peter Timms from Big Brother to know what the slang is for generators. The Jenny. Okay, all right.
All right. So the generator, the petrol generator I had got. So I'd read the instructions and my mate Sean, who I've mentioned on the show before, he's been coming around and helping me do some handyman stuff. He's the handyman guy. He's been teaching me how to build gates and fences and all that kind of shit. Very sweetly, because I got him a generator as well. I got him on the shipment, and so I didn't sort of realize at first why I'd received this text, but then I was like, oh, I think his wife's mate. Just give Charlie a call, make sure he hasn't blown himself up. He was like, how you going with the Jenny? You okay? Like, is it
Did he say Jenny?
I can't remember. Okay. And if we're going to get stuck on this, the show's going to go for 3 hours.
This is what the show is.
Let me see, actually.
What are you talking about?
I'll just see.
This is literally what the show is. This is what this show has been for nearly 15 years. It's just you saying something and me making fun of it. Like, let's not change what has been a somewhat winning formula for a decade and a half.
What did he say? How'd you go?
Yeah, let's see. What did he say?
How'd you got to work? Just
What did he say? Give us what he said. I want to know what this guy who actually knows what he's doing, the local handyman, Sean, a guy I trust when it comes to these things. If Sean is using Jenny, I'm happy with Jenny being the term. I'm happy to right? He's an expert.
Yeah. No, that's fair. While Charlie's looking that up, ChatGPT ideas for nicknames for generators.
Okay.
Top 5. Power Mule.
Power
Juice
Mule.
Box.
Yep, okay. The Juice Box.
What Wagon?
The
Grid
what
Ghost.
wagon. I like it.
The Thunder Brick.
The Thunder Brick.
That sounds like doing shit.
Mate, grab the, hey,
Where's Wills?
hey, mate, could you just grab the Thunder Brick, please?
No. It's like Will's in the bathroom doing a Thunder Brick.
He's dropping a Thunder Brick. You've been Thunder Brick.
Look, I'm looking at the text message. There's no mention, but we did speak on the phone. I'm positive Jenny.
He said Jenny.
Because Jenny's were the talk of the town for a week, right?
Yeah.
Because most of the town was without power. So those who had, there was the haves and the have-nots, because not everyone had a generator.
No.
So if you've ever gone to like a restaurant in like, you know, Bali or Thailand or whatever, and you go out the back to use the toilet, you'll normally see like a generator with 50 cables running in 6 different directions because it's powering the kitchen, but also like the neighboring restaurant and stuff. And so that's what was happening is, you know, I got our generator going and we've got this lovely neighbor next door, Peter. And Peter's like an old school, like, you know, she's been living in the country for, you know, 30, 40 years and very capable, very independent, but has that sort of old school Aussie stiff upper lip kind of thing of, because I went around to check on her when we lost power. And she was like, oh, no, we're all good. We're all good. We've got plenty of, you know, canned food and stuff like that. And I was like, well, I've got a Jenny. She's like, what the fuck are you talking about? You mean a power brick?
You mean a Thunderbox? A Thunder Brick.
I called it a power brick.
Like Thunderbox. A megawatt or whatever it's called.
I said, I got a generator. I said, why don't you just run a cable over? And she's like, no. And I didn't push her on it. And then like the weather got worse, obviously. And
is she, how much older is she older?
She's in her like late 70s.
Yeah. So do you think it's a generator gap?
So she had that. She actually, because she's got another property up. She's got like a farm up in Federal or something like that. And so she was like, "It's okay. I'll go get mine." But the roads had been blocked off. The SES had, you know, blocked off a bunch of roads, so she couldn't get out. So I eventually convinced her to take some power. I said, just run your freezer.
Just have a little bit.
Just have a little bit of juice. Well, the other thing is she has...
try a little bit.
She has
just have a little bit at first. It's free.
She has
You can have some.
Oh, I texted her that first morning we had the heavy rains. I texted her to say, is it all good? And she was like, because she's got this... if you can imagine my property, so she's on like a slight incline, a little battle axe behind mine. So she's on a higher part of the hill. And when it rains heavily, you look out my window and you can just see like a waterfall running down the driveway because of the incline.
Yes.
So I texted her after that first night of heavy rain and she was like, oh, the swimming pool's overflowing. I'm a bit nervous about it. I'm trying to drain it. Do you have any spare hoses? So I went round with some hoses and she literally, I don't know where she'd got these hoses, but there must have been like a dozen hoses she had put into a swimming pool and siphoned out into a stormwater drain, and she was trying to drain the pool, but there was so much rain it was just filling up again. So I said to her, oh, you know what, I've got a sump drain pump, which is a submersible pump that you put in, you drain, and once it gets to a certain level, it just automatically kicks on and pumps the water out. What are you laughing at?
No. I'm impressed that you like actually, this is one of the things that I've loved to see from you, which is you've moved to the country where you have to be more self-sufficient and you need to learn how to do these things. And you've learned some of it on YouTube. You've learned some
all
of it
on
Sean.
YouTube.
No, Sean's been involved. There's been, and I've seen you develop into a man who can like drop terms like that into a conversation without it seeming like you're saying those words for the first time. I was quite proud of you.
What about the Jenny though? That doesn't.
Did not like it. Still don't like it. It's awful.
So I went and took the sump pump round, and she was like, "Oh, she's gone." You know what she actually did? It was quite patronising, but it's kind of adorable at the same time. Is because we were trying to figure out how we're going to keep your pool, get the level down so it's not going to overflow into your house. And then I had this great idea of, I've got the fucking, I've got the submersible pump. I'll go grab that. And I took it round to her and she was like, Charlie, my dear boy, I don't have power. And she grabbed my face between both her hands.
Like you adorable idiot.
Like, I'm 47, by the way. Like, not far from death.
Yeah.
So I said to her, why don't you just take the power? Take the power, then you can drain the pool, you can get your... And so she finally agreed. And it's actually quite sweet because I think she's on the board of the hall in town. You know, I think she does work with the CWA, and I think she's known around town as kind of quite an authoritative figure. You know, she has that kind of presence, and I think she's not used to having people check in on her. I think people just always assume that
she'll be fine.
She'll be fine.
Yeah,
she's always got her shit together, and so because I didn't think anything that I was doing was particularly. I wasn't going out of my way. I was just being neighborly. Are you okay? Can I get you anything? Take some power. But the knock-on effect, because we've had just not disputes, but neighbourly things. You know, we're talking about putting a fence up and all this kind of stuff, and our dog runs into their front yard and stuff. And so there's been just a little bit of friction here and there, nothing major. But that simple act of kindness, you know, and hey, take a little bit of power from my Jenny, has now like improved the relationship. Like she's now saying, hey, my son's going down to Yamba. Do you like fresh prawns? I'll bring you back some prawns.
Yeah, being neighbourly.
Yeah, being neighbour. But
forming connections with your immediate neighbours, particularly in times of, I mean, I spoke about this in my show, Logical, that is available on ABC iView still if you want to watch it. But it was about, living through the pandemic, in the anti-vax capital of the world, but it concludes with the story about how that entire community came back together at the end to help each other in the floods. Like a disaster can often be a way of a community realizing, we might have different beliefs, we might have different opinions, we might have et cetera, and feel like the world is so divided. But in this moment, the only actual people that we can rely on are the people that we live next door to, and that it's really important in a community. I've been reading a lot of books about alienation and the social media age and the attention economy and just the way that's changing us. And it is that idea of like, we've moved away from knowing or helping who our actual neighbours are.
Yeah, we just put up bigger walls, bigger fences.
And we think we get community from this online community, but it isn't the same thing, As much as you can find a community of like, we're Cure fans and we connect and we're in different, and that's great. But when your pool's about to overflow.
But do you think that's a generational thing? Because I was literally listening to a podcast this week, a political podcast, and the guest they had on was this Gen Z girl, American.
Jenny Z? That's what I call it. That's what I call the generations, Jennies.
But she was talking about like motivating. That was the discussion was around how young men went right, in the last US election. And how
finally you said it. They're right. Are we right? Come on, we pivot. This is our pivot. We're finally TOFOP. It's going to be a Joe Rogan reaction podcast. We listen to TOFOP.
Let's do it. I think there's so many YouTube channels that already do that. But she was saying young women could be the balance to that. Like young women are actually moving further left. And
that's true.
And she was talking about how she grew up in really hard conditions, was estranged from her family at a young age, was living with her boyfriend, worked really hard, got a scholarship to a university. And she said what she realized when she got to the university, because we often assume community means family, friends, neighbors, right? And then she got to this university where she should have been, in her community surrounded by her peers. But she said, I had nothing in common with a lot of these kids because they all came from wealthy backgrounds. None of them could really understand what I'd been through. Yeah. And I couldn't identify with them either. But it wasn't till I started having a presence online and creating content, I started meeting people. And she said, it sounds weird, especially when she talks to boomers, when she says some of my best friends I haven't even met. Like these are people that I have friendships with online, but they have recommended me for jobs. They've given me amazing advice. They've, got me through some really hard times. And I was the boomer listening to that going, how can you be certain that you're your best friend? Like, don't you have to have at least, a face-to-face meeting to just a frank that, these guys are your friends? But she was adamant that no, like this is for a lot of people. This is how communities are built now.
It is how communities are built. But like when we're seeing what some of the deficits of that or the unintended consequences or side effects of that are as well. And I don't think that you can. I think that you can. Like, there is nothing perfect about either way of forming a community and find your community or your family or your space or loneliness is the biggest epidemic in society at the moment. And so many of our problems in society come from alienation and loneliness. So this system by which some people are forming communities is also a system by which some people are feeling incredibly more disenfranchised by society. So I think that we just have to have these conversations as if they're nuanced, that we talk about both the pros and the cons. When we talk about AI, it's important to, like Adam Spencer's always like very optimistic about, the medical advancements around AI. I'm quite pessimistic around the negative consequences of AI that we're seeing play out already in real time. We're seeing so much of that at the moment. So I do think it's about that balance of both of those things happening at once. And I do think, yes, absolutely, people make different connections in different generations. I'm just saying that there is something about that community connection that has been how we have lived as human beings for most of our lives.
Yeah.
Like most of the reason that we were able to survive as humans, we're not the fastest, or we're not the deadliest, we're not the strongest, we're none of those things. The only reason we were able to they say that one of the theories is the thing that separates us from the chimpanzees or whatever it is that we, is that they socially bond.
We can't smoke cigars and roller skate at the same time.
We can. No, we can actually do that. We're allowed now. I don't know if you know that. That's the thing that we're allowed to be able to do. Okay. We cannot pretend to be Robbie Williams in a biopic. Yeah. No, is that their way of socially bonding is grooming.
Right.
So when they groom each other.
Oh my God, really? That's terrible.
I mind grooming.
Oh my God.
That's right. And so I'm just saying, it's actually, I'm pro-grooming. This is a really pro-grooming thing. No, they will, when they pick at each other or comb each other's kind of like, that's their bonding. That's their group dynamic, so what we have is language. And so we use language to bond as communities. So they think that the thing that was able to separate us from that was that 20% of their time every day was grooming, which is just the bonding. We are able to do that more efficiently through language and community and bonding. But the more that we get away from that idea of what our small community was, it is a different experience. It's not to say that one is better or worse, but that it is a different thing. That the online version is a simulation of what we get in real life.
That's true.
Right?
Yes.
And they are not. You can't just replace one with the other in the same way as you can't say chicken and faux chicken are the same thing.
Yes.
They are, for someone who wants that other thing, they are a replacement, but they are not the same.
And that is the thing that I enjoy most about living in a small town is definitely that community aspect. It's the sense of safety in terms of who most people are. Like you don't feel weird about your kids just sort of playing out in the street unsupervised because the risk is very low of something bad happening. But also, the kids that I only went to daycare with, she's now in school with, and the families all know each other, and it is just that sort of sense of being neighborly, like because we live in a house where we have not lots of room, but we have spare rooms, and so when this was all going on, we were letting our friends know who were in low-lying areas or flooded areas that hey, if you need to come stay with us, like just the doors are open, and that's kind of something that. I mean, living in Sydney, we could never afford to do that. It's like, hey, if you want to come sleep on our couch, there's already two people on the couch. But just that idea of community is so great. And you're right. Like after 2022, I was so impressed with the way because the government wasn't fucking doing anything, the way the community mobilized, and every group that I sort of signed up for or took part in was organized by just by locals. They started the Instagram page, or they posted on Facebook, or they put the call out. And I think I told that story about there's a girl who was coordinating supply drop-offs to a storage unit out in the pocket. Trucks would come in with supplies, and then she would put in the back of utes, and they would go out to these communities. And I was talking to her, assuming she was from like the Red Cross or something like that. She was a university student who didn't like what was going on, and just decided her dad worked in freight, and so she sent a message out, could we get some trucks here? And that was all done just because she has a sense of like, I don't know, was it civic responsibility or something like that? I was just blown away by that. And so, yeah, I guess maybe that has influenced a little bit with me sort of knocking on my neighbor's door. I mean, I hope not. I hope I do that without, the last 5 years of living in that area. But you did come to mind at one point, because anytime I do something that is unnecessarily elaborate, like when I put myself into a situation, I'm like, why am I doing the hard thing rather than the easy thing? Because you're quite good at going, just take the easy path. Sometimes, like, if it's convenient and doesn't impact on anyone else, you should just follow that route. But I have this Catholic thing of like, oh, no. Like a little bit of suffering is not too bad,
that's right? Yeah, I've got to, what is it without the suffering? Isn't the suffering the whole point of it?
So, because there was a flood threat, I was like, well, I should sort of sandbag some parts of the house because they're in low-lying areas. And I know from 2022 that a lot of water came in here. And so the SES was saying, hey, we're dumping sand in this area, so take your bags and go fill up with sand. And so Jen was like, can you go get some sandbags? And I was like, yeah, but we don't really live in a flood area, and I don't want to take sand away from, people who might really need it. So I'll just go to the beach and get my own sand.
What are you talking about?
And that's when the little will in my head said that. What are you talking about? Just go where the fucking...
Go where they've said you can go. They didn't say don't come and get sand. Also, by the way, they can get sand from the beach. If they need extra sand, they know where sand is.
I mean, part of me was just like, well, no, I don't want to take sand away from those who might actually need
but it is the one thing they're not running out of is sand.
But I also selfishly was like, but there'll be no one at the beach. Like, I'll be the only one. I'll go to a part of I won't go to like main beach or anything. I'll go to the part of the beach where there'll be no one, and I won't have to wait, and no one can see me there.
Okay.
So I drove down to Broken Head Beach, which is, for those that know, that's Hemsworth territory. I think he's known as the king of Broken Head. Pretty much owns that entire area now. Beautiful. It's the south end of Tallow, so 5K beach, beautiful. One of my favourite beaches to go to. It's just so beautiful down there. When I rocked out, and normally it's packed. It's always busy there, even in off-peak seasons. Great surf.
Yeah.
Drove in. And this should have been my first warning because it was like completely empty. I don't know if there'd been some kind of storm warning, like don't go here, but I drove in.
I imagine there probably had because there was a storm coming. Remember there was that tropical cyclone that was coming your way?
It was very much like 28 days later where I'm like, fuck, where? I think what had happened actually, because there's a caravan park there at the end of the car park. And so normally that's really busy. There's always backpackers, grey nomads, whatever. Yeah. But it was eerie to drive in there and see the whole place had been evacuated.
So you're saying that all these people in caravans and tents had decided that being out close
in a cyclone, the water in a cyclone
was not the perfect place to be. Okay.
So I arrived there and I pulled as close to the beach as I could. I had a couple, those big rubber buckets you do for your gardening, the big, yeah. So I had a couple of those that I was going to fill up and put in the back of the Jeep. And I pulled up as close to the sand as I could get. And there was two, what do you call them, looky-loos? There was two, what do you call them, disaster tourists, whatever, the people who come in and they were just there to...
Oh, they were just there to see what was going on.
Yeah, to look at the surf. And by that stage, the tide had rolled right in. So it's a pretty wide beach, Tallows, but it was covered in water. The water was already right up to the car park, but it kept receding and so revealing a bit of sand. So in my head, I'm like, well, I'll just wait till it recedes. I'll run out and fill my bucket. So I'll
fill your bucket with wet sand.
With my wet sand. That'll be easy to carry.
Yeah, they're delight.
But part of me was also self-conscious about, I don't want to do it in front of these two looky-loos. So I'll just wait in my car until the looky-loos fuck off.
Yeah, no, it's good. Let's not have anyone who could save me in case there's something going wrong. Let's wait until my only chance of safety and being rescued from a storm situation goes away.
But the looky-loos were bloody set in their ways. They stayed there looking out at the water. I don't know what they were doing. They just
were looking.
Yeah, I know, but for it would have been at least 20 minutes I waited for them to go, and they didn't. And they must have been wondering,
what is he doing? What's this going in his car doing? What does he want to do that he can't do in front of us? Why is he here?
So in the end, I was like, all right, I'm just going to have to go out in front of the looky-loos. Yeah. So the water receded. I grabbed my first bucket and I went down in the water. I went down to the sand and I started shoveling it in. And the looky-loos were watching me. Right. And I just was like, this is what I didn't want. I don't want to be watched while
they're like, this is the best. This is what we came down here for. To see some idiot swept into the ocean.
Brown cardigan, just like a live feed.
We got one. We got an idiot. Well, that's how they get those. There was famously there was that the metal detector guy. Did you see that footage? That guy gets smashed. Somebody's got to film that stuff to get it online. So maybe those looky-loos were just down there.
Always one dickhead will turn up,
right?
To do. Yeah,
some idiot's going to come down here who doesn't want to go to get the free sand.
So I was filling my bucket, and the looky-loos were watching, but the water was just coming in too quick. I would literally do a couple shovels, then I have to go back. It's this is completely
idiot. They must have just been look at this idiot.
So the looky-loos saw me fill not even a third of a bucket.
Not even a third, because it's so heavy as well.
So heavy, but also I just couldn't. No. The water kept coming in. So I put my bucket back in the Jeep, and then I drove, and I was like,
a third of a bucket of wet sand. I've solved this. I've saved the family. Don't worry, Dad's got us covered. He's got a third of a bucket of wet sand.
So I was heading to where they dumped. I was like, I'll admit defeat. I'll find out where they've dumped the sand, the SES. And then I was like, wait a minute. There's a little path down there that's made of sand. I'll go
get some of this path.
Get that path sand. And so I was like, but I'm going to be digging a big crater in the middle
of a path.
A trap. Like, is that
hole?
Is that bad? And
Yes,
I'm like, fuck it. Like,
probably.
desperate times call for desperate measures.
Now you're just like putting a trap in.
Yeah. So I dug a pit in the middle of this path. I was like, well, the water's probably going to come in and fill it up anyway. So I get my sand. And then I didn't have any like sandbags, obviously. And so I started filling garbage bags, like heavy duty black plastic garbage bags. That's not a good idea.
No.
Terrible idea.
Yeah.
Because they
If it
hold...
was a good idea, they'd recommend it.
They hold the water.
Yeah.
So
particularly if the sand is already half wet, which yours is. So
after night one, I'm like, okay, that did not work. That just actually... And if anything, I enabled the water to get higher because it just sat on top of the bags and then got closer to the door. So next day, I just was like... Jen, we're going to have to fill... I said, what are our shittiest pillowcases? And she's like, none of them. They're all... good quality.
Now, with the SES sandbags, did you have to provide your own bags?
I think you had to bring your own bags.
Okay,
and that's why they recommended pillowcases. They say you should bring your own.
Okay.
But you know what make good sandbags is all those reusable shopping bags that you have. That you
finally.
have 500
of those.
Yes.
Finally, those 500 recyclable canvas shopping bags.
So I did that. I shot bagged those. And then it was game time. They were like, okay. So that night where we had the heavy rain, so loud. I said to Jem, let's just take Iona. Well, let's move downstairs. So at least if shit goes down when the storm hits, glass breaks, whatever, we'll be okay. Like it's dry downstairs, safe from they kept saying you've got to find a room in your house that has the least amount of windows, that is secure, that if shit goes wrong, you'll be safe. So we had one of those downstairs. So that night I was like, it was almost like on the Titanic. I was getting texts from people saying, hey, you okay? Is everything going to be all right? And I'm like...
Did you get in contact with anyone who has their own... Because there's a few people up in that part of the world who have their own bunkers and...
I don't know any...
Do you know any bunker people?
I don't know any bunker people.
No, okay.
No, we had the WhatsApp going for all my friends who live in the area. And it was like, for some people, it was... Not that they didn't lose power.
No.
That was fine. It just was like heavy rain and that was it. So that night though, I went to bed and they were predicting by 10 a.m. in the morning, fucking cyclone's going to hit and you're going to be fucked. And they were saying if you are south of the eye of the cyclone, that's the worst place to be because that's where the wind and the rain is the most intense. And that's exactly, the forecast where we were. And so the next morning I woke up and I'm like, did it happen? Like, did we miss it? Because you saw some trees. I went for a walk around town. The river the creek had broken and there's a few trees down, but it was relatively okay. There was not much damage. And then I checked the hazards near me app and it was like where our town is, there was a ring of kind of alerts, evacuations, flood warnings, all this kind of stuff. But we just had been missed. It was just so fortunate. There's nothing significant had happened apart from the only thing was the power was out. But then something shifted where in town, because everyone sort of came out. It was like everyone emerged from their hiding spaces and we were told not to, once the storm passes, the danger hasn't passed because you can get sort of gusts coming in with no warning. And so don't walk your dog, don't go looking at things. And so everyone ignored that advice. Everyone took their dogs out and there was one town, there's a general store in town because everywhere had lost power. And these guys were so smart. They invested in a very big genny. Oh, yeah. They got like a genny on a trailer. And so they got their store up and running. So they had a barista machine going. They still had food. Yes. And so that became the hottest ticket in town for the next 3 days. Like people were literally driving in from every other town. They must have...
I heard you've got coffee.
Yeah. Like chocolate, coffee, cheese. They had everything. And it was hilarious because... the generator kept blowing out and because the strain coffee, because I've got my coffee machine at home. And so when you've got the generator going, because we had the fridge going and the Wi-Fi going, a couple other things, you plug that coffee machine and geez, the drain is huge.
Really?
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, because that's what you got to worry about. When you connect devices, it's stuff that has a big pull. Oh, yeah. I know the electricians who listen to this show just hate when I talk about electricity.
I love it though because it feels like you're dumbing it down for me. Yeah, it's come from Sean. He's told you what it is, and you've dumbed it down a little bit more. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting.
So they kept losing power, but it was almost like like a party. Like there would have been, on average, every time I went there, close to 50 or 60 people at least, just milling around the general store, buying coffees, but just more just hanging out and talking because you know, no one could use their phones or watch TV or anything like that. But then the storm, once the sort of storm had passed, then you start to hear people being like, what was it all about? And I'm like, first of all, it hit somewhere, right? Have you seen the footage out of like
it's awful
Queensland?
Ipswich and places like that.
Shocking. Not great. Just because it didn't impact you. But this idea that...
Also, secondly, the idea that you need to be perfectly warned about something. It's better to... Clearly, natural like climate events have smashed this region previously. It's been the victim of it when you can see the worst possible scenario. It's great that this was not the worst possible scenario, but don't you think it was good that you were warned that it could possibly be the worst possible scenario?
It's the same thing with the pandemic, whereas like in the aftermath, everyone's like, well, why didn't you give us the exact details of what we needed to do and how we need to do it and what was going to happen?
It's because people don't know.
Because they don't fucking know. And it's like everyone is like that Monday's expert where they look back and go, oh yeah, well, this
why
is
wasn't this handled perfectly?
Yeah.
Because nobody knew at the time. We were all confused.
And that's when I was like, I mean, I love to go on the Byron Bay Facebook page and just check out what the cookers are having to say.
Yes,
and that was just like confirmation that this climate change is a hoax.
Oh, if they can't get this right, how do they predict things that are meant to be happening 30 years from now?
Oh, we're gonna cry and hide every time there's a bit of rain, are we?
Yes.
It was great surf. We could have gone out in the surf. The surf was amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's even better. I like this more.
But I was saying what I felt like it was a great drill because now, like, it's going to happen again.
Of course.
And so now I know what I need to do. And I've got everything I've got the generator now. I've got all the cable ties. I won't go back to Broken Head to get my sand. Like that was the one thing. I won't just go to where the SES have got the sand delivered. But I figure, I mean, if we're going to stay living in this area, like they talk about climate resilience, right? Like you've just got to be used to these kind of things. And so I'm like, okay, well, because the other thing now we're dealing with is the mold. Like that's the shittest part not the shittest part, but for us is you get all that wetness and then the sun comes back out.
And the mold.
Yeah. And so
and up there, that mold grows
and it's
so
fucking
quickly.
really bad for your health. Yeah. Like it's black mold.
Yeah, it's not great.
So the only kind of damage we had is in the new office that we built. There was a leak and I couldn't work out where the leak was coming from, but it's clear that the insulation behind the wall has gotten soaked because it's just, you can see it coming through the weatherboard and it's like, I'm going to have to remove that entire I'm going to have to pay someone to remove that entire board and we're going to have to reseal it and stuff. But that's good, right? Like I know that the one thing I'll say about a 115-year-old house is I guess back then they sort of had to build them strong because there's all these, the Northern Rivers is notorious for people building stuff that is not up to code, building stuff illegally, building stuff without permits. And so when you buy a property up there, you're taking a gamble. Like that shed on your property or that granny flat or whatever, it might be held together with blue tack. You just don't know. But so 2 extreme weather events since I've been living there and the house is held together quite well. I do still think I need to replace those windows upstairs because even when I was taping them up, the glass was moving in the frame. Yeah. Like taking the tape off, I'm like, this window's going to pop out.
Wow. I'm glad you're safe. I'm glad. And I hope to everybody who's listening that you've also got through it all the best you can possibly can.
Yeah, I had to cancel the Friday live stream last week.
Oh, yeah. No live stream.
But people were
understanding.
People were understanding. I did have to make one decision actually on the Friday night because I was texting with Sammy Cav and he was like, are you going to watch the football tonight? Like, I don't have any power. I said, I've got the generator going, but that's running the fridge and the Wi-Fi.
Did you say Jenny to him or did you say generator?
Generator. I think I didn't want to
You were too embarrassed to say Jenny in front of him because it's a weird term.
But in the end, I decided that I would watch the football. It cost me half a tank of fuel.
Half a tank of fuel?
Yeah, because it's 3 hours. You get about 6 to 8 hours on the Jenny when you're running fuel, even on the eco mode. And so to watch the whole game cost me almost half a tank of fuel, which if it had been worse and like the fuel lines had been cut off or the access roads had been cut off.
And you couldn't go anywhere to get supplies because you'd watched the game of football.
It was a good game of footy though. Like Hawks versus Sydney. I'm really glad I did it. Which we should remind people, Will, that Two Guys One Cup.
Yes, our AFL adjacent podcast is back, baby.
Every Monday morning.
Every Monday morning.
Yeah, we were normally recording a Sunday, and then it's out first thing on a Monday.
Which means that sometimes we don't get to all the games because there might be still one going, or depending.
All right.
But you get the gist. And our podcast is not. You know what? There are 18 football shows on television at the moment.
Yeah,
we fill another niche. I like to think. I think more than ever, there is lesser requirement on us to cover off any of the actual football because the football has been covered. I've already got to the point where we're not even through when we're speaking through the first round of football in the AFL, and I am already sick of the amount of repeated football commentary there is around the exact same talking points and topics, and I think that this might be the year that our AFL adjacent podcast, really is a breath of fresh air compared to everything else.
I had the same thought, but you know what I'm noticing is
they're coming into our area.
They're coming into our areas.
Yeah, I've noticed that too.
Kane Corns is talking about the Fox Footy Wrap. I'm like, you stick to your shit. That's us.
Yeah, you have outrageous opinions about whether a team has a premiership list and they're underperforming and whether they should sack the coach. That's what you do, Kane. What we do is play the Fox Footy Wrap and talk about who's into it or not. That is our area, and you stay out of it.
Lots of great podcasts at everyonerelax.co. Hey, if you want to support the show, the best way to do that is still to join our Patreon. We put up full videos of Two Guys One Cup. We put up full videos of TOFOP. There's lots of great bonus content there, and there's also an archive that goes way back. So if you're new to Everyone Relax and you want to see what's this show, what are these shows all about, there's heaps of archive material in there as well.
And I got to catch up with the great James Fosdyke when I was in Adelaide doing my improvised shows. Had breakfast/lunch with Fozzie, which was really lovely. He had a complete nervous breakdown when the most recent remember we did the AI art episode.
Did he think we'd paid
and
someone
he
to do
thought
that?
we'd done an AI art and nearly had.
Well, someone on Patreon, actually, one of our patrons was really angry when I posted that because we talked about it and someone said, "Can we see the art?"
In the context of because Foz then listened to the episode and understood that it was all in context and whatever. But when he initially first saw it, he was like, "Oh no, they haven't."
Yeah,
it was real.
We got an angry message, which is like, "I can't fucking believe you guys got rid of Foz and you're doing this shit." And I'm like, no. Listen. This wasn't us. This wasn't us.
No. But yes, but there's still the great archives of all Foz's stuff as well, and you can also check that out. And there are a bunch of new episodes of Philosophy all over the place. We've done some really great episodes with a bunch of new comedians, with some great overseas headliner comedians. Yeah, so there's heaps of good stuff coming as well.
A little bit of sizzle for next week's episode. We don't often do this, but the demand has been overwhelming. People want to know my take on 5 reforming.
Yes.
So next week,
this is huge for us.
That's huge.
I mean, I never thought this was going to happen. So next week we will talk about.
We're going to do it's going to be a 5.
We're going back. We thought we were done, but we're going back, baby.
I'm Charlie Clausen.
Oh, hang on. Can I just plug?
So we don't do plugs. Cut that bit out, Mike.
I just want to do some plugs if I could. So firstly, Canberra Comedy Festival, there are not very many tickets left, but there might be a couple of tickets left if you're hearing this for Canberra Comedy Festival. But after that, Melbourne International Comedy Festival, at the time of us recording this, my shows are about 90% sold out. So if you want to come and see what you're talking about, Will, in Melbourne, I would get in really quickly because I can't add any more extra shows of that. But I have added an extra show of Will Legitimate, last year's show. So if you didn't see last year's show, if you'd like to see that again, I'm doing a one-off performance of that at the Comedy Theatre during the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. I have added Brisbane shows, Tasmania shows, Newcastle shows, Orange shows, and a bunch of other things as well. So if people go to comedy.com.au, they'll be able to find out all those details.
I'd also like to plug a mini-series we're dropping into the old TOFOP with Friends slot on Tuesday. Guy Davis and I of the Video Store are doing a special because it's SNL's 50-year anniversary.
Yes.
So we are counting down the best SNL movies.
Oh, great.
11 official SNL movies. I thought there was more because you can get confused. There's so many tangentially.
What are the spin-off characters? Yeah. So you're going in that idea of like a Wayne's World or a Coneheads.
It's got to be based on a sketch that
happened on SNL, not just characters, not just people from SNL
And can I just say, the gulf between a good SNL film and we obviously start, from 11 and work our way down. The bad ones are It was a real slog. Like I actually had to text Guy after the first few movies and said, we've made a huge mistake. I don't think I can stomach this. But that's out now.
Well, Charlie, in the spirit of doing our production meetings in the show, do you mind if we put that SNL series out throughout April for the whole of April? Is that okay?
Yeah, disregard what I just said.
Well, no, that's a good thing for people to watch out. It's coming. That's okay. That's soon. April's very soon when people are listening to this. So that's very soon. We're going to do that. And
in a couple of weeks.
Can I actually, while we're doing random plugs at the end of the podcast, I'm going to do another one that's not for anything of ours, but I'm just going to do this plug. Alexi Toliopoulos, who people might know, Cam and Alexi did those brilliant, documentaries, and they might have seen Alexi on Question Everything. Brilliant Alexi Toliopoulos is doing a show with Zachary Ruane from Auntie Donna, and so it's called Refused Classification. It is based on an incident in Australia where the movie Ken Park was refused classification, and Margaret Pomerantz on the movie show became an advocate for it. She'd seen it at the Cannes Film Festival, and she was an advocate for it being shown in Australia. It was banned in Australia. They tell that story. It has the feel of, it could be one of those documentaries you watch on something and just go, that's about a moment in history that has actually much bigger ramifications, but it's done by Alexi and Zach. They play Margaret and David in the show. Like Alexi is Margaret in the wig, but with his little mustache doing the voice, but they also play all these other characters and tell this story. It is one of the most inventive, timely, weirdly, like shows that I've ever seen. I've seen it twice already. I will see it again. It deserves to be. It's one of those shows that I think on hearing the description of it, it's hard for people to imagine what it would be. You don't need to know anything more than it's brilliant, it's goofy, it's silly, but it's also serious and interesting and thought-provoking. It's such a great show. I just highly recommend people checking it out. It's called Refuse Classification.
Have you done the last video store yet?
No, not yet. Alexi has asked me to do it, but I haven't had a chance yet.
That's good fun.
Yeah.
Good excuse to watch some films that you've forgotten about.
Yeah.
All right. That is TOFOP. I'm Charlie Clausen.
I'm Will Anderson.